wrote a book called Preparing to be an Aesthetic Injector, and we really try to say, here's what you need to know about the history, about the specialty, about the job, about the products, about your market before you go pay for training. Because I'm kind of cheap and I don't want people to waste their money.
Mm.
So
Welcome to the Beauty Talk podcast, where we feature how the best medical practitioners help their patients to look better, younger, and healthier. Now, enjoy the show, and here's your host.
Daniel Gao here. I'm the host of Beauty Talk, where we feature the top medical practitioners in health and beauty, both inside and out. I have Beth Hagen, founder of Titan Aesthetic Recruiting, which specializes in providing a full range of resources and support for aesthetic injectors and practices across the U.S. She has worked in the aesthetics field since 2005, first with Medicis, now Galderma, and then Allergan, holding roles in sales management, product management, and national accounts. She has a wealth of experience and perspectives to guide physicians and aesthetic injectors in business and compensation plan development, staff training, and employee retention and performance management. Now, Titan offers CME credits for the Titan Injector Development course for injectors entering the aesthetic specialty, and she also founded the Learners and Legacies mentoring meeting for new and developing injectors. So, Mary Beth, welcome and glad to have you on the show.
thanks so much for having me, Daniel. I appreciate it.
So let's dive right into it. How did you first get interested in aesthetics?
I, like many people who started in this specialty almost 20 years ago, kind of fell into it backwards. I was called and asked to interview for a job and didn't know when I first went to interview for Medicis whether I was interviewing even for a manager or a rep job. I had never had Botox. I had never had Restylane. I had never been to an aesthetic practice. But when I interviewed with them, the skills that they were looking for, helping to market, helping to educate, helping to create awareness for this burgeoning area of medicine was something that just seemed right up my alley. And I started with Medicis back in 2005, and it's been a fantastic career of supporting aesthetic injectors and practices ever since.
Okay. So then can you talk about how you made that transition from working for Medicis to now starting up your own company, and now you have Titan?
Running Titan.
Yeah.
That's not as quick of a story.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky that as I've had the opportunity to work in aesthetic medicine, first with Medicis and then with Allergan, I've had opportunities to be a sales rep, so to work with a variety of practices across the country. Then I went into management and managed teams that actually covered parts of 10 states. And then I went into the home office and got to do marketing with Botox Cosmetic. And then I got the opportunity to start the national account team for the facial aesthetics side at Allergan, and got to work with a lot of the very large aesthetic multi-state groups across the country. So working with Ideal Image, with Laserway, with Sona, with Skin Spirit, and being able to really be the liaison between Allergan and those organizations helped me not only understand more about their businesses, but it also helped me understand some of the challenges that they faced and that the entire specialty was faced as we moved into more and more demand coming into this specialty. So in 2017, I took the brave leap, I guess, of faith and started Titan. And we started Titan as an aesthetic recruiting and screening service. All of us who come from corporate America are very used to having recruiters call and say, hey, we've got an opportunity over here. Do you want to leave this job? Or we call recruiters and say, can you find me a job in this area? But that was something that really didn't exist within aesthetic medicine. Usually reps would, they'd talk to reps and reps would say, can you find me, hey, this practice is looking, or the practice would say, can you find an injector for me? And, but as more and more reps were out there and the territories got smaller and smaller, we really got to the point where nobody wanted to lose a rep in their area. And so it was harder for practices. And then the other thing that's super hard for aesthetic medical practices is that there's no academic training for aesthetic medicine. You can't get an NP or a PA or an RN certification in aesthetic medicine. And so what I found was that there was a real need to help injectors be able to identify how to move their career and support their career along, and to help practices find injectors to support their business and their practice. But then there was also another need, which was, how do we bring new injectors into this area of medicine? And, everybody wants, we kind of had a chicken and the egg thing
Mhm.
where everybody wants a trained injector, but how do you become a trained injector if nobody wants to hire you as a new injector?
Mhm.
And so that's where after, really looking at kind of where we were, we had Titan be able to start expanding. And so we went from just being this placement and screening agency, and I can tell you a little bit more about the screening in a minute,
Mhm.
to really trying to expand and offer more services. So Titan itself stands for Top Injectors Treating in Aesthetics Now.
Mhm.
And our tagline has always been Titan supports great injectors and great practices for great patient outcomes. Because that's really why we're all out here. I mean,
Mhm.
yes, it's nice to, have some revenue flow, but if patients aren't getting those great outcomes at the end of the day, none of us have jobs.
Got it.
So that's
Okay.
kind of how it all got started.
Okay, got it. So, could you talk a little bit more about some of the other services? Because you have recruiting in the name of the company, Titan Aesthetic
Yeah.
Recruiting, and that's probably what most people think. You just do recruiting, and you kind of talked about that in the last question. But could you provide a little bit more of that overview of the resources, the services that you provide to aesthetic practice? I think you're going to talk about screening as well as one of those
Yeah.
things.
Well, thank you, Daniel, because that is something that I think is really important to think about. With Titan, we really are, I jokingly call it a cradle to grave support agency
Mhm.
for injectors and aesthetic practices that do injectables.
Mhm.
And because there's no academic training there and no certification other than the CAMS exam, there really is the opportunity to be able to have an organization to support this area of medicine. I mean, if you think about plastic surgeons and dermatologists and facial plastics, they all have societies. They all have organizations to support the professional activities of their specialty. There is not one organization in the United States that specifically supports RN, NP, and PA injectors in aesthetic medicine.
Mhm.
So I never want to be a society. I never want to take on all of that responsibility, but I
Uh,
do want to be a support agency to help injectors, whether they're thinking about transitioning into this specialty, whether they are currently injectors and they need resources to do their job better, are looking to have an exit strategy and figure out, where's my career going to go, or whether it's a practice looking to hire and retain and support injectors within their practice. We offer resources for all of that. If you visit the Titan website and scroll down on the homepage, you'll see what I call the bubble chart. And we really have four main areas where we really try to support injectors and practices.
mhm.
We really look at how do we help bring the right people into the specialty and get the right foundational training.
Mhm.
And so we do something, I created something called the Titan Assessment. And this is a screening that we created specifically to look at candidates coming into the aesthetic field, whether they are estheticians or laser techs, whether they're injectors, whether they are front desk specialists, whether they are, marketing or practice managers. This specialty is one of those where you really have to have both sides of the business brain. You have to
Mhm.
really understand the medical side of it,
Mhm.
but it's cash medicine. So you need to understand that you have to ask people for money.
Mhm.
So we created a 4-part screening that involves a right left brain quiz, an aptitude conversation, a picture assessment, and a hobby overview. And there are points assigned to each of those four areas. And when we do the screening, we do it on the phone in about an hour.
Mhm.
And I will write up then a full 5 to 8 page screening report that we provide either to a practice that is asking us to screen someone that they are considering, or we do the screening for every candidate that we send out for interviews as a Titan candidate. And the impetus for creating the screening is really how do we look at both sides of the equation in the hiring process? I think there are a lot of times when practices are thinking about here's what I need for my practice. But for a true win-win employment situation, you have to take into effect and into account what does the practice need to support their goals, but what does the injector, what does the employee need to make them be happy and want to stay there?
Mhm.
Because I don't think there's any employer out there that wants to keep going through the hiring process over and over and over again. The win-win is when you find somebody and you hire them and you both love working together and you stay there for a long time. And that's really our goal. So that's why we start with let's really go through this Titan screening assessment. Let's really make that perfect match. So that's why I tell everybody, yeah, the name of the company says recruiting,
Mhm.
but I always tell everybody, I'm not a headhunter. I'm really not a recruiter. I'm more of a matchmaker because when we can create those true win-win scenarios for employment arrangements, it's placement.
Mhm.
And it is really helping people be placed in a job that is going to be right for the employer and the employee. And I want people, I don't care as much about getting the placement fee, though I do need that to pay some of the bills. But what I really look for is how do we make that match so that people work together for a really long time? And we're very lucky that one of the areas that we found works really well is that when we help people find naive candidates, people who have never been injectors before, but have the desire, the drive, the passion, and the natural aptitudes, we then have the Titan Injector Development Program where we can give them that foundational knowledge and training to help them transition into this specialty with the right skills, the right knowledge, so that when they then take that next step and do their hands-on training, they then get up to speed incredibly quickly. We actually have one wonderful client that we work with that said, Mary Beth, what we love about working with Titan is that the people that come through your program and are screened and are trained with Titan get up to speed in about 6 months in terms of revenue production
Mm.
compared to what some of our other injectors have taken 4 to 5 years to get to.
Wow, that's
And
incredible.
let's be honest, nothing's going down in terms of expenses, right?
Yeah.
So I tell injectors and candidates all the time, to get a job in aesthetics, you have to understand aesthetic math. And
Mhm.
that basically means if there's no revenue coming in from the products you sell and the services you provide, there's no money to pay you.
Mhm.
And so it really behooves the injector to invest in themselves and to get this good foundation of knowledge about the specialty and about what we do before they do their hands-on training. And then when they do their hands-on training, once they get a job or get a job right away after that, then they're practicing it, they're reinforcing that, and they get up to speed very quickly. That's kind of what we tend to focus on in
Mhm.
the screening and the placement portion, and the training and development portion. Then we move into placement. And that's where we basically have two fees. We
Mhm.
charge $3,000 to place people who are naive candidates or people who are new to the aesthetic arena. We charge $15,000 as a placement fee for people who are experienced injectors who can walk right in and start injecting and bring revenue in right away.
Mm.
And I think they're very fair fees because
Mhm.
it's really hard to place an experienced injector.
Yeah.
There's just so much that goes into it.
Mhm.
And you look at the world we live in, a lot of those experienced injectors want to start their own practice.
Mhm.
And so we do a lot of work with placement. We really help the injectors look for places. We help the practices look for those injectors and place them. But the other thing that we really then work about is helping people think through what resources are out there to help you continue to grow.
Mm.
Because one of the other areas that I think practices struggle with a lot is how do I keep my injectors happy? How do we retain them within the practice? When I worked with one of the major companies, we always talked about recruit, convert, retain. And you don't want to be constantly recruiting new patients. You also don't want to be constantly recruiting new employees. And
Mhm.
so if we can enhance that communication process and help people stay within the practice, that's always going to be a good thing. And we do that through a lot of different education platforms within Titan. Am I talking too much at this
No,
point,
you're
Daniel? I know
good.
I
No, it's
could talk
good.
about Titan forever
I
because
know. No, it's
I get
perfect.
excited.
Yeah.
Well, I think the education platform, you do a lot of education with your business and really helping your customers understand how do we use marketing? How do we use some of the digital arena to be able to get your message out there and have the right branding and be able to make sure that people are understanding what they're going to get into when they come to a practice.
Mhm.
And we kind of have to do that same thing in thinking about how do we communicate with injectors. And so that's where Titan, kind of works a little bit in the same way that you all do in terms of looking at what keeps somebody coming in originally and then what keeps them coming back. And for injectors, we've really found that there are two things that make them really happy to be retained within a practice. And it's not always money, which a lot of people think about.
Yeah.
One is they want to feel valued
Mhm.
and they want to be recognized for what they provide in the practice. The second thing is they want people to appreciate what they do.
Mhm.
And you think about in nursing, with nurses in particular, most of the people that I screen, and I've probably screened 600 or so injectors over the last, or potential injectors over the last 7 years, they all have this need to take care of others. And that's one of the most wonderful things about this specialty is you get to take care of a patient in an aesthetic practice and they're not sick.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they have other things. And so they have to be good listeners and they have to be really good at matching patient needs. So we do a lot of education beyond just helping somebody learn to be an injector. We have a Titan membership program where we have more than 130 archived videos that are all by injectors, for injectors. There is a clinical membership program that is only $300 per year, and it really helps people be able to think about things, whether they be clinical issues, whether they be adverse events, whether they be patient communication issues, whether it be how to learn about new products. I mean, I'm excited to have you come on and provide a Titan Talk in a couple of weeks. And what we really want people to understand is that most of the people who are in aesthetic medicine are continual learners. And so we try to provide resources that practices can either buy for their employees or that injectors can buy on their own to help keep that ongoing learning happening. And then we also have a meeting called Learners and Legacies that is not your typical big meeting. It's not a trade show. It truly is a learning and mentoring meeting. We have a clinical track and we focus on injectors with 1 to 3 years of experience. And we try to help them think about, okay, you've learned how to inject, but the job is so much more than that. You know, you have to build your own patient base. You have to really think about not only how do you treat that patient the first time they come in, but how do you create a lifelong journey for them and a relationship with you in the practice? You have to think about what are the things that you need to provide in terms of your own ongoing education and investment in yourself? How do you stay aware of the laws? How do you look at social media? How do you look at marketing yourself? How do you look at retaining patients in your practice as a provider? How do you look at sharing and communicating with others so that you're continually growing and learning? And so that's what we try to do with Learners and Legacies on the clinical side. And then the business side, it's the same thing. We limit it to 100 people in the learning track. And it's not just go here, go there. It is literally one track where it's a flow and they follow through for the entire 48 hours of the meeting. I think that's what we're going to be looking at more as we look at so many more people looking for true knowledge. It's not just something that we're being sold to, but how do we really learn and grow to make the practices run financially solvent, but also to continue to support growth and needs of employees and of the patients that come into the practice.
Got it. Okay.
And then we do exit strategies and all that fun stuff.
So I think that was a very comprehensive overview of kind of the service that you provide and what you do. But I'm curious as far as what role do you think creativity plays in the way that you are training and teaching these injectors? Because I'm sure you get some people that are very much that medical professional. They have the protocols that they follow. And it's 1, 2, 3 steps. But I'm sure you also get others who are looking at it a little bit more from an artistic standpoint. So what would you say, what role does that creativity play in how you are teaching?
You know, that is such a great question, Daniel. And what we find is that
most true aesthetic injectors will say aesthetic medicine is really a blending of art and science. And we have a friend of mine who's an injector who literally that is her trademark. And she owns that patented or that trademarked phrase, you know, where art meets science. And when you start looking at this, aesthetic medicine is a little different from other areas of medicine because it's not just learning protocols. It is every single patient has different ideas of what their expectations are with an aesthetic treatment. I'm very fond of saying that when you think about aesthetic medicine, the toxins are math class and the fillers are art class. With toxins, as long as you inject that specific amount of product into the specific muscle that you're looking to hit, it's going to work almost every single time. And with fillers, it's a completely different story because every single patient has a different idea of what they want their face to look like. So you can relax muscles, and that's pretty much that math class. But the art class, you know, people don't necessarily want things to go back to where they were. They may want to augment something that they see as a deficit on their face. Maybe they have a flatness in their face and they want to have more contoured cheekbones. Maybe they want to contour the lower part of their face so that it provides more of that triangle of youth. Maybe they want to have a little bit fuller volume in a certain part of their face and they want to be able to reduce down volume in another part. And so to be a good aesthetic provider, you have to be a great communicator
not just to tell and educate patients, but to listen to
Mhm.
what they really want.
Mhm.
But then you also have to have that creative and artistic eye, be able to look and say, you know what, the right side of your face is a little bit wider than the left side, or we have a little bit of a asymmetry when we're looking at how things are lined up on your face with your eyes. What can we do with the different products we have to help you achieve the vision that you have for what you want to see in the mirror? And so with Titan, we have a very large faculty that works in our Learners and Legacies meeting, 5 faculty members that have each of them at least 15, if not 25 years of injecting experience and training in the United States
Mhm.
to be able to help these new injectors be able to not just know what to do,
Got it.
because like you said, this is art. It
Yeah.
is not just a protocol driven. And if we can't teach people how to think, so when you're thinking about what an aesthetic injector
really needs to do when they're talking to patients, they really have to think artistically to really do the fillers well, but they also have to be very good scientists and good medical providers to offer really safe and very appropriate treatments for every patient individually, because no two faces are the same.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm sure you must have some great success stories from some of the students that have gone through, or even the practices that have gone through your program. So could you share maybe just one of your best stories about someone who's gone through and used your services and it's really turned around either their career or their business?
You know what? That's such a great question. And honestly, I hadn't thought about that a lot. But I think probably the best thing about working within Titan is the stories that I get from people who say,
I can't imagine how I would have been able to do this career if I hadn't started with the foundation that I received from Titan.
Yeah.
And, it's a little like,
if you're building a website, if you don't start with the right platform, if you don't start with the right branding message, it doesn't matter how good everything is in terms of where you put the message out or how many people you send out. If it's not that right foundational message, it's all going to fail. And you know that in your business. So what we've learned here is that if we don't give people the right foundation,
they feel like they've missed something. So probably my favorite
is my friend Sophie, who is in an injector, a nurse practitioner injector, and she
injected for about a year and a half before she actually came to do the Titan Training and Development Program. And she said, Mary Beth, I knew what to do, but I didn't know why I was doing it. And I realized I wasn't treating all of my patients individually. I was basically doing paint by numbers until I took the Titan course. And Kevin Harrington, who is the clinical director for Titan, and pretty much anybody that's in aesthetic medicine has probably met or listened to Kevin treat at some point. Kevin is wonderful at saying what we do is individualized medicine, but we have to understand why we're doing what we do in order to individualize it for each patient. And I think that's one of the things that Sophie was so kind with her feedback. She said, you've just given me the ability to not just treat one patient, but to assess and think about treating every patient that comes through. And, we've gotten, I don't know, if I'm having a bad day, I go on Facebook and I read the Facebook reviews and people are very, very kind.
That's awesome. That's great. Now, I want to switch tracks a little bit and I want to ask you, you've been in this industry for a while, almost 20 years. So I want to kind of tap into your experience. What are some of the key market dynamics that you've seen over the years and especially as time has progressed, how that has changed?
There are really kind of 3 segments of aesthetic medicine that I've seen so far. When I first started, this very much was a medical specialty that we saw in the core specialty. You saw primarily aesthetic medicine being done in plastic surgeon, dermatology, facial plastic, or oculoplastic offices. And in the plastic surgery offices, it was often an adjunct to the surgery that they did. And so they would say, hey, you're the nurse. These are needles. You do the needles. I'll do the surgery. In dermatology offices, the dermatologists did a lot of the work themselves and saw it as an extension of the medical services that they provided. Facial plastics and oculoplastics also in many cases did our own injections. But as we saw the specialty grow, and especially as we saw the recession that hit around 2009 or 10, in that time frame, we saw a lot of surgeons and a lot of physicians go back to the hospitals or have to reduce or not have as big an impact from the aesthetic or the cash side of their practices. And that was really the impetus for a lot of these med spas beginning. Because oddly enough, what we found during that recession was that while surgery and certain procedures really took a huge dip, we saw non-surgical procedures really have a strong foundation for people who were looking to improve the appearance or give themselves a better opportunity for looking younger so that they could get a job. And, it's kind of that lipstick thing. We always hear like lipstick sales go up during wars because people just want to spend a little bit of money trying to look a little bit better. And it was kind of the same thing that we saw during that 09, 010 or 10 recession time. And so then you started seeing all these med spas. So the growth of the med spa business really happened,
2010 to 2020. And that was when we started seeing non-surgical procedures. We saw more products come to market. You saw 2, 3, 4, now 5 neurotoxins. There are, I think, 30 different hyaluronic acid fillers on the market. You started seeing indications come for a wide variety of areas to be used on the face and in other body parts. You started seeing more energy devices come. You saw a proliferation of skincare opportunities and new facial and esthetician type devices. So that's where we really saw a lot of aesthetic medicine make the transition from just the core physician office to more of a consumer-friendly patient atmosphere for med spas. They're pretty and they have beautiful music and they give you water and they, you're paying cash as a consumer, as a patient. And so to come to these places and feel that little extra pampering was something that's really wonderful. That was also when social media really took off, probably 2020 was really when we started seeing, maybe 2018, we really started seeing a lot of social media. And so when COVID hit in 2020, I think all of us took this huge breath of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to our world? And certainly something that seems as non-important as aesthetic medicine made all of us really think. And I don't think a whole lot of people really expected that coming out of COVID, when we all lived on Zoom or FaceTime or anything where we're literally looking at people over screens, all of a sudden people started really assessing what they looked like. And man, when you hadn't been able to go anywhere or spend any money on anything for a year, 2021 and 2022 were unbelievably huge growth years in aesthetic medicine. And what was interesting and happened kind of at that same time frame was private equity kind of had done a lot of purchasing within the dermatology market from like 2015 to 2020. Well, now all of a sudden private equity said, gee, this aesthetic medicine thing is really hot. I think we want to invest there. So now we're in this crazy world as we head into 2024 where we've got a lot of very successful practices, but now a lot of injectors are saying, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go start my own practice because I want to run my own medical spa, my own medical practice.
And then you're seeing a lot of private equity firms come in and say, I want to buy into
medical aesthetics because it's such a huge multi-billion-dollar market. Now, unfortunately, many of those private equity organizations don't realize that most of that money is sitting with the big manufacturers, and not in the individual med spas themselves. And if any med spa owners are listening to this right now, I'm sure they're all nodding their heads going, yeah, margins are a lot slimmer and it's a whole lot harder than anybody thinks. But we got all these injectors who think, well, I'm going to go start my own practice because I don't want somebody else to take my revenue and I'm going to make all this money when I sell my practice to private equity. So we've got this kind of crazy hurricane of choices going on right now. We have a situation where we have more demand than ever, where we have private equity wanting to buy practices. We have some people wanting to sell practices. We have people looking for exit strategies. We have other people saying, I want to start my own practice. We have still no academic training or professional development program for aesthetic medicine. The only certification that we have that's a board certification is the CANS exam, the Certified Aesthetic Nurse Specialist. And you have to be a nurse or a nurse practitioner to sit for that exam. And you have to have practiced for several years before you can sit for that exam. So now we've got this crazy world with so much interest and so many procedures and so much demand and so much on social media. Where do we go from here? And I can't say that I have any answers, but I do think that as long as we focus on this being a true medical specialty and not an industry, that will help the people who are doing it for the right reasons. The true medical professionals who work in this space are going to keep patients safe. They're going to continue to be educated. And my gut is we're going to start seeing that private equity might move into more of the wellness space, maybe semaglutide, weight loss, hormones, IV therapy, maybe more exercise and mindfulness, and that we may see injectables and the true non-surgical aesthetic medical procedures come backwards a little bit more back to the true medical practices.
Got it.
There's Mary Beth's crystal ball. Whether or not
Got
it's
it.
true or not, I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, sounds good. Now, when it comes to, you touched on this a little bit with the rise of social media, and especially with these practices that want to go out and start their own practice. From a marketing and advertising standpoint, how has that also evolved over time from what you've seen in the industry?
It's, again, such a good question, Daniel, because when I started in this specialty back in 2005, I mean, most of the injectors that I worked with, they were just setting up email addresses. I remember one of the top injectors in the United States right now in terms of training, I set up her email address for her when I was the Restylane rep. And I still laugh thinking about that. I mean, we had cell phones, but they were kind of just early on. People weren't using them. We didn't have text messaging then. We didn't have Instagram. Facebook was maybe just starting, but not back in 2005 to 10. And so when you think about how somebody had to grow their practice back then, it was very much word of mouth. And maybe some newspaper ads, maybe some magazine ads, lots of, we jokingly call it snail mail, but we would put together these postcards and send them out and say, here's the special, come in and look at this. And it is so funny now when I talk to people who are looking at how are they branding or how are they building their practices, people tend to think that everything is based on social media. And I think we're getting to the point where in many cases, social media has become something that is almost like a magazine. They flip through it, they get an idea, they see things, it creates an awareness, but a lot of people don't really trust it because it's so easy to use filters or to Photoshop or to change what we see. So there really is something to be said for being aware, but not trusting everything you see or read on social media. So I think we're going back to an age of definitely one-to-one referrals, talking to somebody that you know that has had a treatment or procedure or gone to a practice and trusting that real-world experience. I think we're going to come back to a place where people are looking for more of a personal touch. When I speak, I talk a lot about how many emails do you, Daniel, have unopened in your inbox?
I'm actually okay with that, but the president of my company's probably got 300,000.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? And the number of people that have, I personally have 5 email addresses and I organize things according to, this is the inbox that I'm never going to look at. This is, when everybody asks you, give me your email address before I'm going to give you any information on anything. Well, that's the dumbest thing in the world because that makes people not read their email. So, and then now everybody's into texting and, let me send you out all these text alerts. It may be helpful if it's something where it's a frequent user or something where you're like, I want this text reminder of something, but it also can be more junk. And so I think we may be going back to where when somebody gets something in the mail, they actually open it up and read it because there's so little. So, kind of my prediction for the next 5 years is we're really going to see the practices see the strongest growth in the ones that use more personal types of communication with prospective and existing customers. So individual patient referral programs, I think we're going to see, I always joke, what's the number one open rate that you can have for any way you can communicate with a prospective patient or client? Handwritten thank you note. Because I don't know anybody who gets a handwritten thank you note in the mail. That's not the first thing they open.
Got it.
So I think if we, a lot of the private equity people have a tendency to want to come into the space because they think it's very fragmented. They think there's lots of economies of scale that can be and that they can pull things together. And I ask them to step back and say, why do you think it's fragmented? And I do think part of why people love the experiences they have in aesthetic medicine is the skill and the personal interaction they have with their provider is the experience of the surrounding of where they go. And it is that personal touch that they feel like, I'm spending a lot of money and I really want this to be a special experience. And I don't think you can turn that into, McDonald's. Again, just my experience, just my gut instinct, but we'll see.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Mary Beth. Now, so I have one last question for you, but before I ask it, I want to point people to your website at www.titanesthetic.com. Now, last question is, what do you think is the most important piece of advice you can give to someone, a medical practitioner, who knows that they need training or that they need support, but they aren't sure which program to go to? Because there's programs out there for training, but if they don't know which one to go to, how do they make that decision?
3 things I suggest to people. Number 1, talk to people who have been through the programs and see what they think about it. Just because someone comes up, what you want to do is when you're looking at the program, you want to ask more than how much does it cost and what am I going to get? Because, it's like my joke used to always be, how many times do you hear somebody call and say, hi, do you offer Botox? Yes, we do. How much is it? It's X amount per unit. Okay, thank you. And they hang up. Sometimes that's what they ask because they don't know what else to ask. And sometimes they only ask, what's the cost of this training program because they don't know what else to ask. So I would always ask any training program that you're looking at, what should I be expected to know how to do when I finish your program? Am I going to have any resources or support to get a job when I finish your program? And can you give me people who've been through your program that I can talk to so I know what their experience is like? So ask the people that run the program those things. Secondly, you always want to look for a program that is reproducible, that has a true training program. There are a lot of people that if you want to go spend a day with somebody, they will charge you to come and have a shadow day or have a training day with them. And that's great. You get to see how they operate in their practice. But there's a lot that you need to learn how to do as a medical provider. And that needs to be in a reproducible course. Titan actually has a hands-on training program site. So if you go to the titanesthetic.com and click on training program, you'll see the information on the Titan Injector Development Program. And then underneath that, you'll see a listing for a clinical hands-on training program. And those are all training programs that are taught by experienced injectors who are all national trainers who run reproducible training programs, who have faculty that you can find out about them and know what their credentials are. And they are all active injectors who actively inject themselves, not just run training programs. Because I really believe if you want to be an injector, you need to learn from somebody who has an active practice and seeing patients and learning about the products and facing the same challenges that you're going to face as an injector. And then the third thing that I think I would do is I would look for reviews. And, there are lots of websites, there are lots of groups online that you can go on and you can say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this program. What does anybody know about it? And, that can help. But if you know somebody personally, go to the best injectors that you know and ask them, if I want to do what you do, where would you recommend that I go to train? But always look at what the options are in your market before you spend thousands of dollars on training. Because there's nothing worse than when I talk to people who say, oh yeah, I went to this weekend training course, I paid $10,000 for it. And now, I'm in debt and I sent my resume to every place in town and I can't get a job. Can you help? And that's kind of why we started the Titan Development Program, because I really think you shouldn't do hands-on training until you have a job or you know where you're going to work, because it really is that old adage of if you don't use it, you lose it. So learn your foundational knowledge first, learn the science, learn your anatomy, learn your facial anatomy inside and out. Learn the why, learn the products. I wrote a book called Preparing to be an Aesthetic Injector, and we really try to say, here's what you need to know about the history, about the specialty, about the job, about the products, about your market before you go pay for training. Because I'm kind of cheap and I don't want people to waste their money. So I just really encourage people, know what you're going to get and know where you're going to work, or at least have an idea about it before you put that money into training. And there are a lot of great training programs out there. We offer one avenue and way to do it, but there are a lot of really great ones. So but just make sure you know what you're getting.
Okay, awesome. Well, there you have it. Mary Beth sharing her expertise. And then Mary Beth, where can people contact you and your company?
You can go to titanesthetic.com. You can find us on Facebook at Titan Aesthetic Recruiting. You can find us on Instagram at Titan_aesthetic_recruiting. You can find information on Learners and Legacies, our meeting at learnersandlegacies.com or at learners.and.legacies. And you can also reach out to info@titanesthetic.com via email. And we're always happy to answer any questions. And I always just want to give a little, you know what, if you don't want to see anything else except some quick links, go to titanesthetic.com, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. There's a footer down there that has 4 columns of links to all kinds of aesthetic information, meetings and certifications and free magazines and information and courses. So start there if you're just looking to just get a little bit of information. And hopefully that'll help.
Great. Well, thanks for being on the show and sharing your message.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Looking forward to having you on a Titan Talk sometime soon. So hope that your listeners will follow you over there and get to hear you then.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Beauty Talk podcast. Any questions, please contact the practice directly with the contact information provided during the show. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.